I am Miriam, 27 years old, and this is the story of how I rebuilt my life after my father kicked me out at 18. He chose to pay for my cousin Taylor's college education while leaving me to fend for myself. After 9 years of silence, he suddenly wants back in my life. I worked hard to create my success without him. Now I have to decide whether to let him back in or close that door forever. Where are you watching from today? Hit subscribe and join me as I share how I found the strength to say no to the father who abandoned me. My childhood started out happy enough. Until I was 9, I lived with both parents in a modest house in the suburbs of Chicago. Dad worked as a sales manager for an insurance company, and Mom was a part-time administrative assistant at a local dentist's office. We weren't rich, but we had enough for family vacations to nearby lakes in the summer, and small but thoughtful Christmas celebrations. I remember Dad teaching me to ride a bike when I was 5, running alongside me with his hands steady on the seat until I found my balance. "You got this, Miriam," he would say. "I believe in you." Those words meant everything to me then. When I turned 7, he built me a tree house in our backyard. It wasn't fancy, just some planks nailed together with a small roof. But it was my castle. I spent hours there reading books and dreaming about becoming a writer someday. Dad would sometimes climb up with cookies and milk, and we would talk about my stories and drawings. Everything changed when my parents divorced. I was 9 years old when Mom sat me down and explained they weren't going to be married anymore. Dad moved into an apartment across town, and I started spending every other weekend with him. At first, these visits were something I looked forward to, marked with red circles on my calendar. But over time, the red circles became reminders of disappointment. Dad's calls came less frequently. His weekend visits were often canceled at the last minute due to work emergencies or other obligations that he never quite explained. Around this time, Dad began spending more time with his sister Judy and her daughter Taylor, my cousin, who was exactly 3 months younger than me. Aunt Judy was recently divorced as well, and I think Dad found comfort in helping his sister through her own difficult time. Taylor became a fixture in Dad's new life, and increasingly I became an afterthought. Mom struggled after the divorce. The child support payments came irregularly, and she had to pick up a second job waitressing on weekends to make ends meet. She developed depression that she tried to hide from me, but I would sometimes find her crying in the bathroom. Despite her own struggles, she always made time to help with my homework and attend my school events. "We'll get through this together," she would say, and I believed her because I had to. As I entered middle school, the comparison between Taylor and me became more obvious in my father's eyes. Taylor was naturally athletic, playing soccer and basketball with the kind of effortless coordination I never possessed. I was more academic, preferring books and art to sports. Dad had been an athlete in high school, and he clearly connected with Taylor's interests more than mine. "Taylor scored 2 goals in her soccer game today," he would mention during our increasingly rare phone calls. "She's really something special on the field." I tried to redirect these conversations to my own achievements. "I got an A on my English paper, Dad. My teacher said I have real talent." "That's nice, Miriam," he would reply, his tone making it clear that goals on a soccer field impressed him more than words on a page. Still, I tried desperately to win his approval. I joined the debate team and won a regional competition in 8th grade. I called him immediately after the award ceremony, standing outside the school auditorium clutching my trophy. "That's great, honey," he said, the sounds of a sports game playing in the background. "Listen, can I call you back? Taylor and I are at the Bulls game. Courtside tickets from a client." He never called back that night. By high school, I had developed a painful understanding of where I stood in my father's priorities. Taylor was the daughter he wished he had. I was an obligation from a failed marriage. This reality was never clearer than on my 16th birthday. Mom had planned a small party with a few friends. Dad had promised to come, even saying he had a special gift for my sweet 16. I spent hours getting ready, putting on a new dress Mom had saved up to buy me. As the party started and guests arrived, I kept glancing at the door. 2 hours and Mom's phone rang. It was Dad calling to say he couldn't make it. Taylor had an important soccer tournament and he needed to be there for support. He said he'd make it up to me. I went to the bathroom and cried while my friends awkwardly ate cake in the living room. When I came out, I pretended everything was fine, but Mom knew. She hugged me tightly that night after everyone left and whispered, "You deserve so much more than this, sweetheart." The gift he had promised never came. What arrived instead a week later was a generic birthday card with $50 tucked inside. The card was signed Love Dad, but even then I recognized the handwriting as Aunt Judy's. Senior year of high school was supposed to be exciting. College applications, prom, graduation plans. For most of my classmates, it was a time of anticipation and possibilities. For me, it became the year I lost what little family stability I had left. Mom's health had been declining for months. Years of working multiple jobs and the constant stress had taken their toll. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, forcing her to reduce her work hours. Our financial situation, always precarious, became desperate. One evening in October, I gathered my courage and called Dad. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months, not since a brief, awkward lunch, where he spent most of the time texting and checking sports scores on his phone. "Dad, I need to talk to you about college," I said when he answered. "What about it?" His tone was distracted. I could hear Taylor laughing in the background. "Mom's not doing well, and with her medical bills, there's no money for tuition. I've applied for scholarships, but I'm not sure it will be enough." My voice trembled despite my efforts to sound mature and rational. "Well, college is expensive these days," he replied. "Maybe look into community college for a couple years. Or student loans. Everyone takes out loans." "I thought maybe you could help," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "I've maintained a 3.9 GPA. I might get into Northwestern." There was a pause. "Let's see how your applications go first, and then we can talk about it. I can't make any promises, Miriam. Times are tough for everyone." I ended the call feeling uneasy, but clinging to the thread of hope that he hadn't outright refused. Maybe he would come through when it really mattered. 3 weeks later, I discovered just how hollow that hope was. I was at Aunt Judy's house for Thanksgiving dinner, an annual tradition that had somehow survived the divorce. Dad was there, of course, along with Taylor, who had just been accepted early decision to Duke University. After dinner, Taylor led everyone outside to see her surprise. There in the driveway sat a brand new Audi A4 wrapped in a giant red bow. "A little congratulations gift for my superstar niece," Dad announced proudly, handing Taylor the keys. "Full ride athletic scholarship and now wheels to match your speed on the field." I stood frozen on the porch watching Taylor squeal and hug my father, the same father who had told me just weeks before that times were tough and suggested community college and loans. Something broke inside me at that moment. All the years of being second best, of making excuses for his neglect, of telling myself that deep down he must care about me too, came crashing down. I walked back inside, grabbed my coat, and called an Uber to take me home. The next day I confronted him. I waited outside his apartment building until he returned from somewhere with Taylor. When he saw me sitting on the steps, his face registered surprise, then annoyance. "Why didn't you call first?" he asked as he unlocked the door. I followed him inside. Taylor sensed the tension and quickly disappeared into what I realized was her own bedroom in Dad's apartment, a room I had never been offered during all the times I needed a place to stay when Mom was working nights. "You bought Taylor a car," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "An Audi, but you can't help with my college tuition." Dad's expression hardened. "Taylor earned that car, full ride athletic scholarship to Duke. Do you know how rare that is? And my 3.9 GPA, my debate team championships, my volunteer work that counts for nothing." "Don't be dramatic, Miriam." Taylor puts in the work. Hours of practice, rain or shine. "What do you do? Read books and write papers." "Because that's what I'm good at," I shouted, tears springing to my eyes. "And you would know that if you paid any attention to me at all." What followed was the most painful conversation of my life. Dad unleashed years of resentment, blaming me for being too much like my mother, for not trying hard enough to build a relationship with him, for always making him feel guilty. He compared me unfavorably to Taylor in every way imaginable, from attitude to achievement to potential. "Taylor appreciates what I do for her," he said, his voice cold. "You just show up with your hand out when you need something." "When have I ever asked you for anything?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "This is the first time, Dad. The first time. And it's always about money, isn't it? Just like your mother." The argument escalated until finally, red-faced and pointing at the door, he delivered the words that would change everything. "If you're so smart and capable, Miriam, you figure it out yourself. After graduation, you're on your own. I'm done trying to please you." Graduation day arrived 6 months later. Dad showed up for the ceremony, but sat with Aunt Judy and Taylor rather than my mother. He gave me a card with $200 inside, about 1/10 the cost of a single college textbook. The card read, "Congratulations, good luck with your future plans." No mention of love, no offer of support. True to his word, he was done with me. I had nowhere to go after graduation. Mom had been evicted from our apartment due to missed rent payments during her illness and was staying with her cousin in a one-bedroom apartment. Gloria, Mom's friend from work, offered me her spare room temporarily. "Just until you get on your feet," she said kindly. I packed everything I owned into 3 suitcases and moved in the day after graduation. That night, lying on a strange bed in a strange room, I cried until I had no tears left. Not just for the loss of financial support, but for the final confirmation of what I had suspected for years. My father did not love me the way a father should love his daughter. My first apartment was a tiny 2-bedroom unit in a rundown building on the outskirts of Chicago. I shared it with 3 other girls, all of us sleeping on mattresses on the floor to save money. My portion of the rent was $300 a month, which seemed impossible on my coffee shop wages of $8 an hour plus inconsistent tips. I had started working at Moonbeam Coffee the day after moving in with Gloria. The manager, a kind woman named Susan, hired me on the spot when I told her I needed full-time work immediately. "I was kicked out at 18, too," she confided. "I know what it's like." Between shifts at the coffee shop, I enrolled in community college classes. Using my savings from high school jobs and a small academic scholarship, I could afford 2 classes per semester. At that rate, a 2-year associate's degree would take me 4 years, but it was better than nothing. 3 months into this new reality, Aunt Judy called. We had maintained a cautious relationship despite everything that had happened with my father. She tried to stay neutral, which I appreciated, even as it sometimes hurt. "I thought you should know," she said carefully. "Your dad is paying Taylor's full tuition at Duke. The athletic scholarship covers most of it, but he's handling the rest. Room and board books, spending money, everything." The news hit me like a physical blow. Full tuition at Duke was over $50,000 a year. Even with a partial scholarship, his contribution would be substantial. Meanwhile, I was counting pennies for ramen noodles and working 30 hours a week for community college classes. In a moment of weakness, I called him. It had been months since graduation, and I thought perhaps time had softened his stance. Perhaps he would see how hard I was working and reconsider. "Dad," I said when he answered my heart pounding. "It's Miriam." A long pause. "I know who it is," he finally replied. "I'm working full-time and taking classes at the community college." I said the words tumbling out. "But I'm really struggling with rent and tuition together. I was hoping maybe you could help, even just a little bit." Another pause, longer this time. "Miriam, we discussed this. You're an adult now. I'm not responsible for your choices." "But you're paying for Taylor's education," I blurted out before I could stop myself. His voice turned icy. "That's different. And frankly, none of your business." "How is it different? She's your niece. I'm your daughter." "Taylor doesn't call me just to ask for money," he snapped. "Don't contact me again, unless it's about something other than your financial problems." He hung up. I never called him for money again. The next 2 years were a blur of exhaustion. I picked up a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight 3 times a week. Between both jobs and classes, I averaged 4 hours of sleep a night. My grades remained excellent, but my health suffered. Jamie, a coworker from the coffee shop, became my closest friend during this time. She noticed how I would sometimes sway on my feet during long shifts, how my hands would shake when I hadn't eaten enough. "You're working yourself to death," she told me one afternoon as we closed the shop together. "You can't keep this up." I brushed off her concern. "I'm fine, just a little tired." But a week later, I wasn't fine. In the middle of a morning shift, after another night of shelf stocking and studying, I collapsed. Jamie caught me before I hit the ground and called an ambulance. The diagnosis was extreme exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. Jamie stayed with me in the hospital, holding my hand while the doctor lectured me about self-care. When I was discharged, she took me to her apartment rather than the crowded place I shared with 3 strangers. "You're staying with me until you're better," she insisted. And we're figuring out a better solution than working yourself into the ground. My roommates concerned after my collapse pitched in too. Sarah helped me apply for additional scholarships. Dana, a nursing student, created a nutrition plan that maximized cheap but healthy foods. Alexis connected me with her brother, who managed a catering company that paid better than my grocery store job. With their help, I quit the overnight job and found a better balance. I still worked full-time while studying, but with slightly better pay and more reasonable hours, my health improved. By the end of my second year at community college, I had completed my associate's degree with a perfect 4.0 GPA. This achievement opened a new door. I was accepted to the state university with a substantial merit scholarship. It wouldn't cover everything, but combined with my savings and a reasonable student loan, I could attend as a full-time student while working just one part-time job. Family events during these years were awkward affairs that I mostly avoided. When I did attend, Dad would acknowledge me with a nod, but little else. Taylor would share stories about her amazing experiences at Duke, the tournament she played in the spring break trips Dad funded to Mexico and the Caribbean. I would smile and congratulate her, then excuse myself early. Taylor wasn't to blame for my father's choices, but her innocent excitement about opportunities I would never have was too painful to bear for long. Aunt Judy tried in her way to bridge the gap. She would call occasionally with updates. "Your dad got promoted," she might say. "Taylor's team made it to the semifinals." Always news about them, never questions about me. I began to realize that even Aunt Judy saw me as an appendage to my father's story, not as the author of my own. The one bright spot in my academic life was Professor Williams, who taught my English literature course at the State University. He recognized something in my writing that I had almost forgotten was there: a voice, a perspective, value. "You have a unique way of seeing the world, Miriam," he told me after class one day. "Your analysis of Jane Eyre captured something I've never seen in 20 years of teaching this novel." Under his mentorship, I began to rediscover my love of writing that had been buried under the practicalities of survival. He encouraged me to add a minor in creative writing to my business major, a combination he believed would serve me well. "Business to pay the bills," he said with a wink, "but writing to feed your soul." For the first time since being cast out on my own, I felt seen for who I truly was, not as a disappointment or a burden, but as a person with gifts worth nurturing. My graduation from State University was a far cry from my high school ceremony 4 years earlier. This time I had a group of people there who genuinely supported me. Jamie took the day off work to attend. My roommates from the early days came too. Professor Williams sat with my mother, whose health had improved enough for her to witness this milestone. Dad wasn't invited. Neither was Aunt Judy or Taylor. This celebration belonged to those who had stood by me when it mattered. With my business degree and creative writing minor, I landed a junior position at a marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it was steady income doing work that engaged both my analytical mind and creative spirit. Within 6 months, I was given my first solo client, a local bakery looking to expand their presence. The campaign I created increased their sales by 30% in 3 months. My boss took notice, and soon I was handling bigger accounts. My salary increased accordingly, and for the first time, I could afford a small one-bedroom apartment without roommates. The day I moved in, I stood in the empty living room and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming pride. Every dish in the cupboards, every piece of furniture, every bill paid on time was the result of my own hard work. No one could take this away from me because no one had given it to me in the first place. My circle of friends expanded beyond my coworkers and college connections. I joined a book club where I met Alicia and Damon, who quickly became weekend brunch regulars in my life. Through a volunteer program at a local literacy center, I connected with Sophia and Marcus, a married couple, who invited me to their monthly dinner parties. These people, chosen for their kindness and authenticity, rather than blood ties, became what I began to think of as my chosen family. They celebrated my promotions, comforted me through disappointments, and never once made me feel I had to earn their love. With financial stability came the opportunity to address the emotional wounds that still affected me. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lowell, who specialized in family trauma and abandonment issues. "What your father did was about his limitations, not yours," she told me during one particularly difficult session. You were not unlovable. He was incapable of loving you the way you deserved. These words were both painful and liberating. For years, I had internalized the belief that if I had just been more like Taylor, more athletic, more easygoing, more whatever it was my father valued, he would have loved me enough to support me. Dr. Lowell helped me see the truth. Nothing I could have done would have changed his behavior, because the problem lay within him, not me. Dating during this time was complicated by my trust issues. I would meet someone promising things would go well for a few weeks, and then at the first sign of potential rejection or abandonment, I would end the relationship preemptively. You're protecting yourself from a pain you've already experienced, Dr. Lowell observed. But in doing so, you're also preventing any possibility of true connection. It was around this time, as I was beginning to work through these patterns, that I met Ryan. He was a graphic designer who occasionally collaborated with my marketing firm. Our first date was supposed to be coffee, but it turned into a 5-hour conversation that ranged from childhood memories to professional aspirations to favorite books. Unlike previous men I had dated, Ryan didn't push for quick intimacy or make grand promises. He was patient, consistent, and refreshingly honest about his own past relationship mistakes. When I eventually told him about my father, he listened without judgment or platitudes. "That must have been incredibly difficult," he said simply. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." As our relationship developed, I introduced Ryan to my mother, whose health had stabilized thanks to better medical care that I could now help provide. They connected immediately over a shared love of gardening, and seeing them together in my mother's small but flourishing community garden plot healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. My professional life continued to thrive. By 26, I had been promoted to senior account manager at the marketing firm. My work with several local businesses had gained attention in industry publications, and I was nominated for a Rising Star Award from the Chicago Marketing Association. The nomination led to speaking opportunities at conferences and an expanded network of professional connections. One particularly successful campaign for a women-owned fitness studio inspired me to launch a side business offering specialized marketing services to female entrepreneurs. This venture quickly grew from a weekend project to a legitimate second income. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to help manage the increased workload while maintaining my full-time position at the firm. With my improved financial situation, I took a step I had once thought impossible. I purchased my first home. It wasn't large or luxurious, just a modest 2-bedroom condo in a pleasant neighborhood. But it was mine, bought with money I had earned, secured with a mortgage in my name alone. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room, just as I had in my first apartment years before. But this time the tears were accompanied by laughter. I had built this life from nothing but my own determination and the kindness of people who chose to support me. I was 26 years old, a homeowner, a respected professional, and surrounded by genuine love. My father had no idea. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning as I was reviewing quarterly reports at work. The notification popped up on my phone screen, and the sender's name alone was enough to make my heart race. Daniel Spencer, my father. 9 years of silence broken by a single message with the subject line, "Hello from your dad." My hands trembled as I set the phone face down on my desk. I needed a moment to process the shock before I could even think about reading the content. Why now? After all this time, what could he possibly want? I took a deep breath and picked up the phone again. The preview showed just the first line. "Miriam, I hope this message finds you well. It's been too long." Too long. As if we had simply lost touch through mutual neglect rather than his explicit rejection. I felt a surge of anger so intense it made my vision blur. I closed the email without reading further and called Jamie. After 9 years of friendship, she knew every painful detail of my history with my father. "He emailed me," I said when she answered. "After 9 years, he just casually emails like nothing happened." Jamie's response was immediate and protective. "You don't owe him a reply, Miriam. Not one word." "I know," I said, but curiosity was already mingling with the anger. "But don't you think it's strange? After all this time, why reach out now? That evening, I met with Dr. Lowell for an emergency session. She listened as I processed my conflicting emotions about the unexpected contact. "There's no right or wrong way to respond," she assured me. "This is entirely your choice. But before you make that choice, I think it's important to understand your own motivations. Are you seeking closure validation? Or are you hoping for something that he may not be able to provide?" Her questions helped me clarify my thinking. I wasn't looking for a father figure anymore. I had built a life without him. But there was a part of me that wanted him to see what he had missed, to know that I had succeeded despite his abandonment, not because of it. That night, I finally read the full email. It was longer than I expected, a rambling mix of apology and excuses. He claimed to have reflected on his past mistakes. He expressed regret for our estrangement. He mentioned hearing about my business success from mutual acquaintances and said he was proud. Most surprisingly, he asked if we could meet in person. "I'd like to make amends," he wrote. "It's never too late for a fresh start." The next day, I received another email with more details about his life. Then text messages began arriving, tentative at first, then increasingly familiar in tone. It was as if he expected us to simply pick up where we left off with the small inconvenience of 9 years of silence brushed aside. I didn't respond to any of these communications, but I did call Aunt Judy. Our relationship had remained distant but cordial over the years, with occasional birthday cards and holiday greetings. "I was wondering if you'd contact me," she said when I asked about Dad's sudden reappearance in my life. "There's something you should know, Miriam. Taylor dropped out of graduate school 6 months ago and moved to California. She's cut ties with your father completely." This information struck me as significant, though I wasn't immediately sure why. "What happened between them?" Aunt Judy sighed. "Taylor finally saw what you saw years ago, that his support came with conditions. When she decided to pursue art instead of the business career he wanted for her, he withdrew his financial backing for grad school. She told him she didn't need his money if it came with control, and they haven't spoken since." I processed this revelation with mixed emotions. There was a certain vindication in knowing Taylor had experienced what I had, but also sadness that she too had been hurt by his conditional love. As the days passed, my father's messages became more frequent. The most recent ones included specific references to my marketing business, with comments that suggested he had been researching my professional accomplishments extensively. "Your website is impressive," one text read. "You've really built something special. I'd love to hear more about how you got started." My curiosity finally got the better of me, and I began investigating what had prompted this sudden interest in reconnection. A simple social media search revealed that my father had gone through a divorce 2 years ago, his second marriage having lasted less than 5 years. His professional profile showed several job changes in recent years, each position seemingly less prestigious than the last. The final piece of the puzzle came when Ryan, who works in financial technology, mentioned hearing about a major insurance company bankruptcy that had affected many former employees' retirement funds. A quick search confirmed it was the company my father had worked for most of his career. "So he's broke and alone," I said to Ryan as we pieced it together. "And suddenly he remembers he has a daughter." Ryan squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" Before I could decide, my father escalated his attempts at contact by showing up unannounced at my workplace. I was in a client meeting when the receptionist called to say someone claiming to be my father was waiting in the lobby. The intrusion into my professional space felt like a violation. I excused myself from the meeting, my heart pounding as I took the elevator down to the lobby. And there he was, 9 years older, but unmistakably the man who had told me I was on my own. "Miriam," he said, arms outstretched, as if for a hug I had no intention of giving. "You look wonderful, so professional." "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice low and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I had to see you. You weren't answering my messages." "Because I'm not ready to talk to you," I said, "and showing up at my workplace is completely inappropriate." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I just thought maybe we could grab lunch, catch up. It's been so long." Against my better judgment, I agreed to a quick lunch at a nearby cafe, if only to prevent further disruption to my workday. Sitting across from him at a small table, I was struck by how diminished he seemed. The confident, imposing figure of my childhood had been replaced by a man who looked tired and unsure. Throughout lunch, he asked superficial questions about my life, while dropping hints about his own difficulties. He mentioned his divorce, calling his ex-wife money-hungry and unreasonable. He alluded to temporary financial setbacks that he was working to overcome. Then, just as I was preparing to end this awkward reunion, he shifted the conversation to my business. "I've been so impressed reading about your marketing success," he said, leaning forward with sudden intensity. "You've really built something special there." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "I've always had a good head for business myself," he continued. "In fact, I've been considering a new venture, something with real potential." He paused, watching my reaction. "The kind of thing that might benefit from your marketing expertise." And there it was, the real reason for his sudden desire to reconnect. "Are you asking me for business advice?" I kept my tone neutral, though internally I was reeling from the audacity. "More than advice," he said, his eyes bright with what I now recognized as desperation masked as enthusiasm. "I'm talking about a potential partnership, father-daughter team. We could be quite the success story." I maintained my composure through the remainder of lunch, neither agreeing to nor outright rejecting his thinly veiled request for financial involvement. As we parted, he mentioned family obligation and blood ties in what felt like a calculated appeal to emotions I had long since processed and put away. "I'll think about everything you've said," I told him, with no intention of doing any such thing. As I walked back to my office, I felt a clarity I hadn't expected. My father hadn't changed at all. He was still the same person who had valued me only for what I could provide him. 9 years ago, I hadn't provided the athletic achievements and easy adoration he wanted from a daughter. Now that I had financial success and business connections, suddenly I was worth his attention again. I had always thought that if he ever came back into my life, I would be torn by conflicting emotions. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of peace. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't even want it. After carefully considering my options with both Dr. Lowell and Ryan, I decided to meet with my father one last time. This meeting would be on my terms, in a place where I felt secure, with a clear purpose to officially close this chapter of my life. I chose a restaurant I frequented often, where the staff knew me and I felt comfortable. I arrived early to select a table that offered privacy without isolation. I wore one of my favorite business suits, a subtle armor that reminded me of my own strength and accomplishment. When my father arrived, he was carrying a gift bag and wearing an expression I immediately recognized as his charming face, the one he used when trying to win people over. "Miriam, thank you for agreeing to meet again," he said, setting the gift on the table. "I got you a little something, just a token." "Thank you," I replied, leaving the bag untouched. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. I agreed to this meeting to hear what you have to say, but also to share some things I need you to hear." His smile faltered slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, that's fair." I gestured for him to speak first, curious to hear what approach he would take now that his initial overtures had been received coolly. What followed was a carefully rehearsed speech about mistakes and regrets, about being a different person back then, and about the importance of family. He spoke about second chances and forgiveness values he claimed to have discovered in recent years. I listened without interruption, noting how little of his monologue contained actual accountability for the specific ways he had hurt me. It was all vague references to difficult times and poor choices, without acknowledgement of the deliberate cruelty of his actions. As his speech wound down, he finally arrived at what I had suspected was his true purpose. "Life hasn't been easy these past few years," he confessed, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "The divorce was expensive. Then the company I worked for all those years went bankrupt. My pension, my investments, nearly everything was tied up in their stock." He leaned forward, earnestness radiating from him. "I'm not asking for a handout, Miriam. I would never do that. But I do have a business idea with real potential, a consulting firm specializing in insurance risk assessment. With your marketing expertise and my industry contacts, we could build something amazing together." He paused, then delivered what he clearly believed was the clincher. "Family helps family. That's what it's all about in the end." I took a slow sip of water, gathering my thoughts before responding. Where is Taylor now? I asked, deliberately changing the subject. The question clearly caught him off guard. Taylor, she's out in California somewhere. Art school or something equally impractical. His tone conveyed his disapproval. We don't talk much these days. Because she wanted to follow her passion rather than the career path you chose for her, I said. It wasn't a question. He shifted uncomfortably. She was being unreasonable. I invested so much in her education, and she throws it away on finger painting. You mean like how I was unreasonable for wanting help with college? His expression hardened. That was different. Was it? I asked quietly. Or is it the same pattern you support people as long as they do exactly what you want, make you look good, fulfill your expectations? The moment they assert independence, you withdraw that support and label them unreasonable. I didn't come here to talk about ancient history, he said dismissively. 9 years isn't ancient history, Dad. Neither is whatever happened between you and Taylor recently. I could see him struggling to maintain his composure to get the conversation back to his business proposition, but I continued. When I was 16, you missed my birthday for Taylor's soccer tournament. When I graduated high school, you gave me $200 and told me I was on my own. When I called you struggling to afford rent while working 2 jobs and attending community college, you told me not to contact you again unless it was about something other than money. With each specific example, he became more defensive. You're exaggerating, he claimed, and you're only focusing on the negative. I had my own struggles too, you know. I'm not saying you didn't. I'm saying that as the adult as my father, you had responsibilities to me that you chose not to fulfill. And now you're successful, he countered, gesturing at my suit, my watch, the restaurant. Clearly you didn't need my help after all. Look at everything you've accomplished on your own. Yes, I am successful, I agreed. But that doesn't retroactively justify abandoning me when I needed you most. My success happened despite your absence, not because of it. I could see his frustration mounting as he realized this conversation wasn't going according to his plan. He tried a different approach. Everyone deserves a second chance, Miriam. I'm your father. That bond can't be broken no matter what mistakes were made. Actually, it can, I said calmly. Being a father is more than biology. It's showing up. It's supporting your child even when it's inconvenient or doesn't align with your preferences. It's loving unconditionally. I sat up straighter, feeling a sense of power I had never experienced in his presence before. And here's what I've realized. I don't need a father anymore. I needed one when I was 18 and scared and alone. I needed one when I was working 30 hours a week while taking classes. I needed one when I collapsed from exhaustion and ended up in the hospital. His eyes widened at this last revelation, information he clearly hadn't known. But I don't need one now, I continued. I built a life without you. I created a family of people who love me without conditions. I found success on my own terms. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. I'm not going to invest in your business. I'm not going to give you money, and I'm not going to pretend that we can have a relationship now when it's convenient for you, after you discarded me when it wasn't. You're being unfair, he protested, his charm entirely gone, now replaced by the angry defensive man I remembered from our last confrontation 9 years ago. This is what family does. They help each other. You're turning your back on your own father. No, I said with finality. I'm doing exactly what you taught me to do. I'm looking out for myself because no one else will. I picked up my purse. Don't contact me again. Don't come to my workplace. Don't email or text. This chapter of our relationship is closed. As I walked away, he called after me, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. You'll regret this, Miriam. Everyone needs family eventually. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I was completely free of the hope that one day, somehow my father would become the person I had needed him to be. The moment I got to my car, the emotions I had so carefully controlled during the confrontation came flooding out. I sat behind the wheel and sobbed great heaving cries that felt like they were being torn from the deepest part of me. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a complex release of tension, anger, and finally relief. When the tears subsided, I called my mother. Our relationship had strengthened over the years, especially after I was able to help her move into a better apartment and access proper health care. She had been cautious when I told her about Dad's reappearance, neither encouraging reconciliation nor warning me against it. "It's done," I told her when she answered. "I met with him, heard him out, and said my piece." "And?" she asked gently. "And nothing. It's over." I explained his thinly veiled request for business investment and my refusal. "I'm proud of you, Miriam," she said, her voice warm with emotion. "Not because you turned him down, but because you made the choice that was right for you. That takes courage." Her validation meant everything. She more than anyone understood the complicated feelings I had navigated throughout my relationship with my father. The next day, I had a session with Dr. Lowell. I recounted the confrontation in detail, still processing the finality of it all. "What you did took immense strength," she observed. "Many people spend their lives hoping for approval from parents who are incapable of giving it. You've broken that cycle." "I thought I would feel more conflicted," I admitted, "but mostly I feel free." "That freedom is hard-earned," she said. "You've done the emotional work necessary to understand that his limitations were never a reflection of your worth. That's a profound realization." That evening, Ryan organized a small gathering at his apartment with our closest friends. He hadn't called it a celebration exactly, but there was a sense of marking an important transition. Jamie arrived first, embracing me with the fierce protectiveness that had characterized our friendship from the beginning. "Proud of you," she whispered. "So damn proud." The others came bearing food, wine, and the easy comfort of people who know each other well. As we sat around Ryan's living room sharing stories and laughter, I looked around at these people who had chosen to be part of my life and felt a profound sense of belonging. Family isn't always blood, I realized. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when the real test comes. The ones who love you without agenda or expectation. The ones who show up not just when it's easy or convenient, but when it matters most. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into expanding my side business. What had begun as a passion project was now growing into something that could potentially become my primary career focus. I hired a second part-time employee and began the process of formally establishing it as an LLC. The work was exhilarating, all the more so because it represented choices I had made for myself, paths I had forged without outside influence or pressure. Each new client, each successful campaign, was a testament to my own vision and abilities. Unexpectedly, I received an email from Taylor about a month after my final meeting with my father. We had lost touch over the years, our relationship too complicated by his favoritism to develop naturally. The subject line read simply, "Reaching out." She had heard from Aunt Judy about my recent interactions with my father and wanted to connect. We arranged to meet for coffee when she was back in Chicago visiting her mother. Seeing Taylor after so many years was strange. The athletic teenager had grown into a poised young woman, with paint-stained fingers and a quiet confidence I hadn't seen in her before. "I owe you an apology," were her first words after we exchanged awkward hugs. I was oblivious for so long to what was happening, to how differently he treated us. "You were a kid," I said, surprised by how easily I could absolve her of responsibility. "We both were." "Still tha," she insisted. "I should have seen it sooner. Maybe things could have been different." We spent the next 2 hours sharing our parallel experiences with my father. How his support had always come with invisible strings. How his love had always felt conditional on performance and compliance. How in the end he had treated us both as extensions of himself, rather than as individuals with our own dreams and identities. When I told him I was leaving business school for art, he actually said I was betraying him, Taylor confessed. As if my entire education had been for his benefit, not mine. "That sounds familiar," I said, sharing my own final confrontation. By the time we parted, something new had formed between us. Not quite friendship yet, but a mutual understanding and respect that held potential for a different kind of relationship than we had ever had before. We promised to stay in touch, and this time I believed we actually would. Back at work, I channeled my newfound emotional clarity into a proposal that had been forming in my mind for months. I presented my boss with a plan for a mentorship program specifically designed for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, offering them internships and professional development at our firm. this could be a meaningful way for us to give back to the community while also cultivating diverse talent, I explained as she reviewed the detailed proposal. She looked up at me with newfound respect. This is excellent, Miriam. Let's present it to the executive team next week. The program was approved with full funding, and I was appointed as its director in addition to my regular client responsibilities. The position came with a significant raise and increased visibility within the company. My side business continued to thrive as well. I hired my first full-time employee, a recent graduate who reminded me of myself at that age, determined, creative, and hungry for opportunity. Teaching her the skills I had developed over the years gave me a sense of purpose beyond my own success. At home, Ryan and I began having serious conversations about our future together. After 2 years of dating, we had developed a relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. "I'm not in any rush," he told me one evening as we discussed the possibility of moving in together. "I just want you to know that I'm all in whatever pace feels right to you." His patience and understanding were precisely what made him different from anyone else I had dated. He never made me feel that his love was contingent on meeting certain expectations or following a predetermined timeline. One Sunday afternoon, I visited my mother at her apartment. She had created a small but thriving community of friends in her subsidized senior housing complex, organizing a weekly book club and tending the community garden. Her health, while still requiring management, had stabilized with proper care. "You look happy," she observed as we sat in her small kitchen drinking tea. "Truly happy." "I am," I realized, somewhat surprised by the simple truth of it. "I feel like I've finally stopped waiting for something that was never going to happen and started fully living the life I've built." "That's all I ever wanted for you," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Not wealth or status, or even the conventional definition of success. Just this peace within yourself." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. From the devastated 18-year-old girl who had been told she was on her own to the confident, successful woman I had become. The path had been harder than it should have been, fraught with obstacles that no young person should have to face alone. But I hadn't been alone, not really. I had found people along the way who showed me what true support looks like, who demonstrated that love isn't something you have to earn through performance or compliance, who proved that family can be chosen, built through genuine connection rather than mere biology. And most importantly, I had found my own strength. The voice that had been silenced by years of seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it had finally emerged clear and true. I no longer needed external validation to know my own worth. Sometimes the most powerful word in the English language is no. No to toxic relationships. No to conditional love. No to others defining your value based on what you can do for them rather than who you are. My father had taught me a valuable lesson, though, not the one he intended. He had shown me exactly what kind of person I didn't want to be. Someone who measures relationships in terms of transaction rather than connection. Someone who withholds love as punishment. Someone who sees others as means to an end, rather than as complete beings worthy of respect. I had built my life on different principles, on authenticity, compassion, and the belief that true strength lies in lifting others up rather than tearing them down to maintain control. When my father re-entered my life seeking to benefit from the success I had achieved, without him saying no, wasn't just about denying him access to my resources. It was about affirming the boundaries I had established and the values I had embraced. It was about honoring the journey I had taken and the person I had become. Some might see my decision as bitter or unforgiving, but I see it differently. Forgiveness doesn't require reinstating someone to their former position in your life, especially when they haven't demonstrated genuine change. It means releasing the anger and resentment while still protecting yourself from further harm. I have forgiven my father, but I have also chosen to write him out of my future story. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Not because I don't believe in second chances, but because I believe in them so deeply that I refuse to waste mine on relationships that diminish rather than enhance my life. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to say no to someone who once meant everything to you? Someone who should have been your protector, but instead became a source of pain? If so, I want you to know that you're not alone. Your story matters, and your boundaries deserve respect. Please share your experiences in the comments, and hit like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what hurts you, even when, especially when that something is family. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to write your own on your own terms.